Alright, Schlockmeister fans, the last Gary Coleman movie I have to review, The Fantastic World of D.C. Collins. Let's check it out. Gary Coleman is in school. His dad works for the UN. It's a special school. He's a daydreamer, though. He plays D.C. Collins, and now he's daydreaming that he's on the space shuttle. That's his friend Tatiana as the co-pilot in his daydream.
Come in, D.C. Collins. Come in, D.C. Collins. D.C. Collins.
Major, go to backup communications. I'm not reading. I'm not reading.
And you're not writing either.
Thank you, Addison.
Jason Bateman plays Addison Cromwell, his nemesis.
What are you doing?
Isn't it obvious? You're a big astronaut hero, so we're giving you a ticker tape parade.
Bernie Casey plays his father.
I must have the option to keep certain missile operations secret.
And I must have the option to prevent a nuclear catastrophe. Deputy Markov, hiding those missiles.
That's an Atari joystick, and that helicopter said MASH on it. So naturally, he now thinks he's Hawkeye Pierce in MASH. Marilyn McCoo plays his mom.
Fantasies again.
Yeah, Mom, but it's nothing. You know what the doctor said. I have a supercharged imagination.
Tell me about it. Once when you were 4, you went into a phone booth and took off all of your clothes.
Now there's some Russian satellite stuff going on. Don't exactly follow all of it, but
4, 3, 2.
we got some Cold War stuff in this film.
Data from the Pentagon and the Kremlin is being received and loaded into the Skywalker cartridge.
So they're stealing information from both sides. The feds break in. That's Fred Dreyer.
Hands on your heads. Up against this wall. Come on, move it.
Take the cartridge!
One of them's going to escape with the cartridge.
Stop right.
We checked that out. Looks like somebody broke into their computers, too. Manning.
They broke into our computers and the Russians.
It's what's known as equal opportunity espionage.
Well, the bad guy with the cartridge is now being chased through Central Park, New York City. And he's been darted. And that's exactly where D.C. Collins is reading a book. Now, he slipped the cartridge into his backpack, unbeknownst to him, of course.
Here! Looks like DC's having another one of his flights from reality.
He does have a rather active imagination.
Nobody believes him, of course.
No, I didn't imagine it. It's true. I can tell the difference. Why don't you bring the boys down from the lab and have them dust the place?
Well, Fred Dreyer and his partner,
Pretend you did for a minute.
they track him down to ask him a few questions.
See this guy do anything while I'm trying to get rid of something?
No.
Did he try to give you anything?
No.
Did he say anything to you?
No.
Well, it doesn't take long before the bad guys are also pursuing DC. I think those are some Russians. DC still doesn't know he has that cartridge. This, of course, leads to his Star Wars fantasy.
We'll take care of you right now.
No, she has to tell the warlord where her people are hiding.
I'll never betray the Alliance. Let me go. Let her go, you two pieces of space junk.
You!
Yes, it's me. White Cloud Climber. Fire below! Never mind.
When he comes out of his fantasy, he manages to fight them off.
Oh, I don't believe it.
Hey, kid, come back! Come back here! You kid!
Deputy Collins' son.
DC.
Tatiana's
Why
dad.
would the KGB, the Foreign Service, be interested in him?
Just a few questions, please. It is very important.
Another chase after DC. And then he thinks he's Indiana Jones later on, and we see this daydream. course, in this daydream, he's Alabama Smith. He ends up taking the guy's gun and tossing it away. Action-packed excitement. And at this point, they're able to capture him. And while he's captured, he thinks he's James Bond. 070, actually. And he somehow thwarts the brain sucker machine.
I won't give you another thought.
Here we are.
He tells the story, of course, and no one believes him
I
still.
asked you to give me all the details, and you certainly did.
Did I mention the Canadian Quarter?
More than once. Tatiana, I presume that DC brought you here for a reason.
Finally stands up to his nemesis.
I demand satisfaction. I'll see you in the park after school.
So as the two of them meet to have a fight,
You better release my brother. I'm gonna gun
he
you
envisions
down.
himself in a gunfight with
No
him.
way you're gonna take the law in your own hands, Clanton. That's why they made me marshal, and that's why I'm wearing this star.
Well, before the fight happens, Addison Cromwell actually backs down. After DC was begging him to hit him first.
What?
I want your son to be a decoy.
At this point, they finally believe
What
him.
are you talking about, Mr. Manning?
That's ridiculous. You're asking a 14-year-old boy to risk his life?
Sucker.
Addison and DC make
My
peace.
compliments. Come on, DC, bury the axe. That's Hatchet. What's the difference? Be friends. Mr. Collins?
There's kind of like a sleepover or
Yes,
something
Ray.
at DC's house.
Seriously, this one has Russian writing on it.
I don't have a game like that. Let me see it.
The cartridge has been found.
That isn't Russian. What does it say?
Listen, DC, I've got something very important to tell you.
I know. I've got the access codes on the cartridge.
That's right. How did you find out?
With a little help from my friends.
As he enlists his friends to help him, he suddenly becomes General Patton. And almost like a Home Alone situation. The bad guys had bugged the apartment, and before the good guys could get there, they got there first, but in the final confrontation, the bad guys do catch up with them, and they grab Tatiana hostage.
Hold it! He's got the girl.
DC tossed the cartridge down from where he is, and then he plays Spider-Man. Bad guys are caught.
Don't move.
In the last scene in the movie, DC thinks he's Superman. All right. Let's talk about the fantastic world of DC Collins. This is the 7th Gary Coleman movie I am reviewing on this channel, and it's the 7th pre-recorded VHS tape I have. And like all the other ones, none of these have been released on DVD. They're all VHS only, so of course I burn a DVD-R and make some homemade box art for it. Why is Gary Coleman movies, why are they not on DVD? I don't know. They need a box set. But anyway, this was the last movie he made when he was supposed to be the young, cutesy Gary Coleman one. But he's looking kind of older here. He's like 16 when this thing came out, and he's looking like kind of like that last year or two of Different Strokes when he wasn't that cute little boy anymore. He was just older. So anyway, this movie, he plays DC Collins. His dad works for the UN. His dad is Bernie Casey. His mom is Marilyn McCoo. And he has this active imagination. He always imagined himself in these various scenarios, like he's Luke Skywalker, like he's James Bond, like he's Indiana Jones, like he's Hawkeye Pierce from MASH. And then we see him play out these scenarios. Meanwhile, in the real world, there's some Russian bad guys or some other bad guys who have these satellite codes that can launch missiles, both the U.S. and Russian missiles, I guess. And he's hidden them in this like game cartridge, and he's being chased through Central Park in New York City. That happens to be where Gary Coleman is like reading a book. And he gets shot with a dart, but before they can get him, he manages to slip this disc or this cartridge into Gary Coleman's backpack, unbeknownst to him. So anyway, eventually the bad guys figure out that Gary Coleman has this disc, and they're chasing him around Manhattan and wherever else. Nobody believes him when he tells everybody these stories because he has such an active imagination, and everybody knows that they think he's DC being DC again. Ultimately, though, eventually they do believe him, and they set him up as a decoy. And when he's having like this slumber party with some friends of his, including Jason Bateman, who's talking like a British guy, he discovers the game cartridge. He didn't even know he had it, but they see it has Russian on it, and then he figures out that his place has been bugged. The bad guys show up, and they ultimately hold this other girl, Pamela Adlon, who is a Russian friend of Gary Coleman's, whose father also works at the UN, hold her hostage, and say, we give us that cartridge and we'll let her go, blah, blah, blah. Well, at this point, DC Collins plays like Spider-Man, swoops down, knocks them both off their feet. The police get him, and that's pretty much the end of our film. So, it's a ridiculous film, but again, whatever. What are you going to do? I'd never seen this before, actually, until today, so I'm glad I have this movie. It kind of completes my Gary Coleman collection, at least of the cutesy Gary Coleman movies. The only one I'm missing from that time period is something he made right after this one called Playing with Fire, which complete different type of film. It's a made-for-TV film also, but he was an arsonist, some sort of serial arsonist killer bad guy. I'm dying to see that movie, and people talk about it and how bad it is, but nobody seems to have taped it back in 1985, so no one's got it. So if anybody has that film, let me know. I'd love to see it, get a copy of it, see it for myself. I don't think it was released on VHS either. So, but anyway, I'll leave a link to the Amazon VHS tape if you're looking for it. It's about $60 though if you're trying to track it down. It's not cheap, just like all the other Gary Colemans aren't. But the movie itself, it's okay, but it's typical Gary Coleman. But it's even for Gary Coleman movies, it's not the best. But what are you gonna do? So anyway, check it out. It's fantastic. World of DC Collins. Anybody else watch this thing? Leave some comments. Let me know. Bye.